On today's show, we question the concept of the will of the people. In the spirit of questioning everything, dear friends, welcome to Good Morning, Trumptopia, with your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Please readjust your earphones volume, as I have received enough notifications from users on the Sprecher platform that apparently for many people my podcast episodes are very low volume, apparently. And I'm not sure what it is, and I'm not tech savvy enough to fix it, I think, except for perhaps the technical adjustment I've made might do the trick. But for many people, this might be a new level of, oh wow, everything's louder. So test your volume levels, whether you're listening on a open air speaker of some kind, directly from a computer and or phone device, or especially if you are listening in earphones of any variety. Please make sure you sort of test it first, not blaring it right in your face, and don't. I apologize for any inconvenience. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry for talking to the music. Welcome to my very own experimental talk radio style podcast show. Originally envisioned as a team effort with myself and perhaps two other people, it has hitherto been mostly a solo effort, and I beg your pardon for the inherent flaws that result. But here we are nonetheless, friends. Thank you for tuning in. I am forever grateful to those dozen or so folks that seem to be listening really regular. In fact, I was kind of reviewing some of my analytics for the year in review kind of process, because I can. That's about full scope. And it's been an interesting year. I think, if I can just talk through the rest of the music, that we can grow this audience and this community and build something together, folks. Namaste and welcome to the podcast. December 10th, 6:24 a.m. Good morning, Trumptopia. Are we wide awake yet, or are we still hitting the snooze button, dear friends? Welcome to the new and improved, briefer, more compact, more succinct format, hopefully. Keep your fingers crossed. With hopefully finally fixing whatever volume issues people might have been having. If the show is now painfully way too loud for you on your normal device based on whatever volume you were listening to it before, and it isn't easily fixed by just adjusting the volume lower several bumps, in other words, there's some problem now, please let me know by going to Sprecher.com and going to a specific episode. If you are new to the episode, or new to the show rather, or you've been listening for a very long time, I would really appreciate that kind of feedback, because I'm trying to just get all the kinks worked out. Some of you may know I've been doing the show for about 4 years, and one of the things that has occurred is that my platform, in other words, the device that I've used to record vis-a-vis the Sprecher.com app, has changed a couple of times. as well as the subscription service level at which I subscribe. But that's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that more in an upcoming, I don't have a name for it yet, but, a show about the inner workings of the show. Not behind the scenes, but anyways, I digress. Here we are, friends, living through a fantastic moment in which 74, let's round up and be gracious, 75, and let's presume that this is this number is sort of underrepresenting the overall enthusiasm, because let's give it a few and say on both counts that maybe some people didn't turn out as hard as they could, right? So let's say roughly it would be fair to say that upwards of 77,223,000. I mean, the number right here, as reported, by the way, I'm talking about the turnout, right, of actual votes. And sorry for playing fudgy games about inflating it. I'm trying to think outside of the box. In terms of literal number figures, let's stick to that. And then we can talk about the margin of error that I'm alluding to there. In terms of according to the Associated Press, and no, I do not believe, nor do I think it would be correct if the press selected the winner. I don't think that's what's going on. Although, as you may or may not realize about me, my friends, I'm well aware that there's corruption. I've discussed my real world view on that and how to parse it before. I won't bore you with the details today. But to the best of my understanding, unless I'm dramatically wrong, the Associated Press has, for a very long time in American history, reported out the numbers as given by the state-by-state electoral officials that are officially, legitimately counting and tabulating and calculating the vote turnout. And so, there's always a lot of fear-mongering talk, usually from whoever's losing, about projections. But projections are the press projections are a thing that we've had lawsuits about this year, we've had a lot of outrage about this year, etc., etc. But ultimately tend to bear out according to the facts, because all they're really doing, I think, barring whatever other bias, corruption, scandal, individual problems, and even corporate level problems you might be going on, which I'm not trying to get into, I think it's fair to say that both in the tradition of the traditional role of the free press here in these great United States of America, and in the sort of basic form and function in which they appear to actually be operating in terms of what happens in reality, the election desk, as they call it, at any particular given news bureau, is basically trying to report out and verify the actual real-time results, and then conduct statistical analysis upon that, given previous voting records, estimated turnouts, and some consideration for the polls, etc. And when they make projections, they think that they've gotten to a reasonable place where the ultimate results will turn out in that favor. And that has been over a century's worth of journalism, let's call it, electoral journalism, which, although there's been the occasional foible and big screw the pooch moment, where, and I'm sure that if one dug real deep, you could find all kinds of bias reporting and all kinds of echo chambering and all kinds of fear mongering and allegations and interesting journalistic scandals, because although I don't think it is absolutistly wholesale, whole cloth, a nefarious engine of complete and total corruption. I think it's a human endeavor, and I think corruption has reared its ugly head throughout history. But as far as I can tell, through all the various sources at my disposal, this reporting is actually pretty accurate. The sort of margin of error for, quote, underreporting I was alluding to earlier represents the number of people under both parties, red and blue, that probably might have, should have, could have, would have wanted to turn out and didn't for whatever reason. And I think that happens, right? Like, it's just another variable. But let's look at what the AP says before I ramble way out of control anymore. And then get to the heart of what I want to talk about today, which is the will of the people, quote unquote. And I don't mean that sarcastically, but I do mean that in the spirit of what I was talking about in my last episode, Late Night Thoughts, Extended Insomnia Quarantine Edition 2020, at like 2 o'clock this morning, I was talking about questioning everything, right? And that a true pursuit of questioning everything means you don't just question in the direction that says, yes, you're right and everyone else is wrong. Like, that would be very flawed questioning. I would have to question in all directions, right? Okay, so I want to talk about some questions that I have about what the will of the people is, how it's talked about and or represented, and or perhaps even mythologized, mystified, and also how it might be understood in a certain, dare I say, spiritual angle. But we'll come back to that in a hot second. Let's take a look at, for those of you curious what I've been kind of talking about from earlier, I was looking at the election results for 2020 as updated on Tuesday at 4:01 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, as presented or reported by the Associated Press, and I typed in live election tracker 2020, and I got a Google results page with this stuff and some clear, easy to read graphics. Now, I understand that a very large number of people out there believe that this is a complete and total hoax. As I've stated before, I think hoax denial, indoctrination culture cancels itself out, and therefore I don't want to spend too much time right this hot second arguing that. And I think no matter what they think, this is the excitement of the moment. We're going to find out January 20th, one way or the other. And if we think about it as a physics experiment, like the double slit experiment, right? Go way back in time in the early days of exciting experimental physics after Einstein and his breakthroughs, or maybe because of, was that before Einstein? I forget. I'm a terrible rememberer of granular detail when it comes to fun facts I've discovered in my various readings. But look into the particle wave duality, non-duality, double slit experiment. Just all that jumble of keywords. Because Donald Trump and his chorus of sycophants, people who choose to echo back to Trump what Trump is peddling for the purposes of whatever gain they think they're getting from it, have created an echo chamber of not so terribly accurate expectation making that somehow or another Donald Trump will be in office getting sworn in for a second term January 20th. And there's a lot of other people who don't think that, right? Who believe and or are under the impression that Joe Biden will be. And I've got a lot to say, but I've been meaning to actually look at the actual numbers because I think they're interesting. So, a top-down review. according to the Associated Press, the most recent reporting from, and mind you, it is multi-outlet headline news that all 50 states have officially certified the count in terms of the bipartisan electoral commissions in each 50 state, because all 50 states do it differently, and they're supposed to be autonomous and free to run their elections any which way they darn well please. And we'll get into the really interesting logic of this newest final Hail Mary. I don't know if this is the final Hail Mary. This might be the penultimate Hail Mary legal circus attempt, but we'll talk about that in a hot second. So that just happened. And that includes recounts and then doubling down on a recount and then tripling down on a recount in some states. Okay? So according to the latest reporting, according to the Associated Press, as of right now, as of Thursday, December 10th, a couple days after Safe Harbor Day, and we are less than a week away from an important day where Congress is going to review all this, I believe, and have their part in calculating the Electoral College vote, even though there's yet a further date down the road where the Electoral College vote is going to once more meet. But if this is true, like I was saying about coronavirus numbers earlier, let's question in that direction. Regardless, join me, dear listener, regardless of your previous choice, wherever, if you're new, if you're an old listener catching up on this episode in the future, and you were, whatever your previous predisposition was, let's just ask the question sincerely, as philosophers, as rational thinkers, as explorers of what is and is not going on. If this is true, according to the Associated Press, Joe Biden has gotten 306 Electoral College delegates pledged to vote for him, which is, in Trump's own words, a landslide victory over 270, threshold to win, because it's the exact same number Donald Trump got in his own election last time around. And Donald Trump is currently at 232. The popular vote, which we'll look at in a hot second, is an interesting breakdown. But Trump is trying to, after an onslaught of, I think unless I'm incorrect, unless all the news is a big fat lie, but assuming this is true, over 50 lawsuits, one of which was like a win of some kind, but it was so negligible, whatever the result was, I don't remember what it is now, what they won, but I think it was like they won the right to do another recount, or I think. I could be wrong about that, don't quote me on that. That is the total speculative statement. Whatever it is that they won, it's so insignificant in the onslaught. Like, the other 49, withdrawn, dismissed, refused. The most significant is that immediately prior to this new attempt by Texas and now 17 other states trying to sue, and I had meant to write them all down, but trying to sue the 3 or 4 swing states that are critical, that without which, technically speaking, Joe Biden would not win. And I've got a whole piece of mind to share about that. But I see the time. It is time for us to cleanse the palate and take a hot second to play a little bit of music from the future by your favorite animatronic animated DJ, DJ Zed. Master Maneuvers Render Magic, a Synthfunk 101 remix live track for your listening pleasure. And we're back. Here's the problem as I see it with this most recent pile-on lawsuit jam of effort to, as in Trump's own tweeted words, overturn the election. That's like pardoning himself. If pardons are for prisoners, and yes, there are people who are innocent who are in prison, and that's a nuance to the whole thing, and often we do indeed pardon people, or use presidential pardons are used to help alleviate or get people out of prison who were arguably to be considered innocent. But technically, as defined, and I've heard this. I was of this opinion after my own, civic education, however flawed that may or may not have been, through my course of my overall educational history, and I've heard this be opined on both left-wing and right-wing outlets by people who are self-proclaimed legal, scholars, people who study law, that a pardon explicitly is a sort of acknowledgement of guilt of the crime in terms of presidential pardons. Also, they are limited to federal level crimes, so state crimes are a whole nother story. But I digress. That's not what I was talking about. The problem I see with Texas and this lawsuit that 17 other states have piled on to, that Trump himself has piled onto with this word overturn, is that it seems to be, and if I myself am incorrect, I can't claim to be a lawyer. I'm not pretending to be a legal expert myself. But they claim, it seems to be contingent on the claim that Texas has the legal standing to sue this collection of swing states over how they managed and implemented this year's election policy, because, and this has been disputed by people who've read, and have spoken on TV, because I seem to understand Texas's legal argument is changing things like how mail-in voting works is somehow unconstitutional. And there seemed to be something about a time frame about when it gets changed. You can't change it on an election year, but maybe that's not explicitly called out. I'm not entirely clear. But that part's a bit of a, extended nuance thing. But if the argument is changing, and I've heard this both on the radio and on television, expressed as analogy by different people. It's like changing the rules in the middle of the game. Now, they both expressed it in different terms. This is me summarizing those two different statements that people made, right? Okay, so by that logic, I am of the opinion that Texas should/must sue itself as well as Trump and possibly the Postmaster General for having implemented and making manifest some pretty obviously big changes, specifically impacting this year's election within the same similar, whoa, that's suspiciously right about this election time, this changes for this election, that negatively impacted voters in all 50 states, right? Because they say, I think the final part of the legal argument or legal thinking, and I could be flawed in my understanding, please do your own due diligence, friends, is that Texas is arguing because the swing states changed mail-in voter protocol or law, those swing states went for Biden, and that negatively impacted the citizens in Texas who wanted Trump to win. I think that that's really seriously part of their argument. So I don't think I'm the first to say, but I must say that I'm not brainwashed. I don't think I'm indoctrinated. I'm certainly not a leftist by any means. But I think that anybody on the left and the center and the non-participant side of the wedge that would say that it's probably, and I don't know, we could be wrong, but it's probably not constitutional for one state to vote vis-a-vis directly to the Supreme Court to overturn another state's certified, finished, done, triple recounted popular vote and therefore electoral college based on the kind of argument that they've made. I think that and I could be wrong about this, and I'm not trying to predict the future, but I won't be surprised, dear friends and listeners, if the Supreme Court doubles down on their denied motion of not even scheduling it on the for consideration docket level. That just happened the other day. And let me pull something up. I posted a meme about this on my Instagram. For those of you who want to be charitable and boost my Instagram, come on, be part of that conversation. Come on down. It's at Mr. Zeppo inside of Instagram. But the Supreme Court, despite having been legally packed, right? I don't think he did anything illegal in doing so, but it is so inflammatory given the context and what they did to the guy before, the Merrick Garland. Is it that Merrick Garland? Yeah, Merrick Garland. The obstructionism that resulted in this, now, massive influx of quote unquote Trump judges on all levels, not to mention, just the Supreme Court level. But they refused already in a previous situation, just flat out denied the request for a case to be taken up so that they can even initiate argument. They just did it. It was top of the docket. You can look up the document. I pulled it up the other day. You can download the PDF. And then it goes on to do other things that they're going to schedule and they're going to look at, right? That they're going to take care of. So, I mean, that's a pretty heavy-handed... I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that even these Trump appointees are going to look at this lawsuit from Texas and these 17 other states and wonder, what kind of chaos are they trying to unleash, right? Because the nearsightedness is believing in the mythos that Trump is weaving that leads someone to the conclusion we must win the election back. If you believe that it has been stolen from you, arguably you think that there must be some attempt of legally trying to rectify that, in the pursuit of justice. But I find it really hard to comprehend how anyone insists on clinging to and crediting this individual who had to give money back from a charity that was a total scam and lost a big, huge lawsuit and had to pay back damages to people for Trump University. That's 2 big scams. That's enough. Does it need to be a 3 strikes you're out rule? If you really need 3 strikes you're out, then the inauguration parade should have tied the knot. Should have done it. Signed, sealed, delivered. That was a big fraudulent scam. Never mind that he's booking his own hotels in places and leaving them empty. As the president, right? Not as Donald Trump, but as the president, he's having the administration book rooms in his own hotels and then paying his own company out of taxpayer funds. And then half the time, for a big, huge number of them, not half the time, but a big, huge number of them, there's not even a thing that people go to. That has happened. He does it. He golfs more than Obama ever has at his own golf courses, which forces the federal government to spend money there. That's the emoluments clause violated every single time he eats and, etc. Every time he services himself in a building and facility that he owns and operates for profit, he's in violation of the law. I think. I could be wrong. Don't get mad at me for calling him out for that. I think that free speech and the right as a member of the community to criticize any politician protects me here, right? And allows me the room to share that. And if you disagree, that's fine. But we'll find out relatively shortly. In fact, I won't be too surprised if the Supreme Court, despite the fact that there are, 3 judges that are recently appointed there, if the Supreme Court is going to stick to some attempt to honor its own function, it will not allow the bypassing of the process as it is known and understood, right? Because no matter what other critique you can give to all of American history, all of American governance, and all of America as a phenomena, as a community of people, and there's plenty of fair critique, right? Let's not get too butthurt. Every community can be criticized for how it works and how it runs and how it operates. And we have to be compassionate about how we do it with one another, because I think that's a calling there. But no matter what else you want to say about this country, and I think free speech and the mores and rules of civic discourse give us a platform by which we can do it thoughtfully, consciously, intelligently, and without resorting to threats of violence. Because not only are threats of violence categorically bad, and people might question why, they do everything that, that otherwise, some of the same people spewing threats of violence agree are generally things they don't want to tolerate done to themselves. They cause pain and fear and anxiety, and they generally are a slippery slope ego trap towards actually eventually manifesting violence. We are better than this, dear friends and listeners, as human beings. First, prior to any party allegiance, political affiliation, or, membership in a cult of personality. But I digress. Texas, you should sue yourself, because you changed your own election rules and made it really pain in the ass difficult, from what I understand, for your large urban hubs of large populations that are generally speaking skewed Democrat to deposit their vote safely in a voting deposit box by making the ridiculous decree. And forgive me, I really laughed out loud when I heard this the very first time back then in the build up to the election day when they came out with this. And it was in the shadow of the Postmaster General's whole insane bizarre set of actions of, messing with the post office. Something that every American, regardless of political stripe, regardless of like even your citizen status, right? If you live in this country, you should be in like, what the hell? Mess with the post office? It's a lifeline for people. I digress. Texas did that thing, right? And counties with very small populations, that wasn't a big deal. Makes sense in a really, really big, spread out, low density, rural county, or that other word I just said a hot minute ago, or in the last episode. Not plurality, jurisdiction, right? Whatever. However they divide out their jurisdiction for the gathering of votes and the allocation of these collection boxes. But in the big cities, one box for the entire county, absurd. And obviously made it a big headache. And was a sort of not so subtle attempt at voter intimidation, in my humble opinion. So y'all should be suing yourselves if you're going to sue the swing states. Okay? And Trump himself, by pushing the Postmaster General to do what he did, by perpetuating this irrational notion, because simultaneously, and like he maintained, although subtly, it wasn't quite as overt, that if he wins, then it isn't a fraudulent, stolen election. It's perfectly fine, and that was to be trusted. That kind of thinking is scam artist thinking, folks. So Trump's various actions, statements, and like complete and total disregard of norms in the build-up to the election and since. I mean, if you're going to sue the swing states for certifying in favor of the guy who got... Oh, wait, we never really hit those large numbers. In terms of the overall total popular vote, Donald Trump, and he made a statement recently, which is actually ridiculous. Too many interconnecting threads. Let me pause and clear my mind for a hot second, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's a hunch, but I could be wrong, and I'll be really sad. But I'm voting, in my mind, and put a pin in that phrase, that concept. Put it up on the board, etc., etc. I'm voting, in my mind, for the probability waveform function fractal unfolding outcome. The Supreme Court looking at this lawsuit and unanimously denying it again. And maybe even making a more concerted effort to put out a unified written statement saying, sorry guys, like it's not, like that kind of tactic's not going to fly. Okay, now... Right, so back to the popular vote, right? Donald makes a really charming statement, which is kind of making the rounds on social media. And some of the commentary from the opposition is that, like, this man, it's like, how does he make sense to people who think he makes sense? Because it's sort of illegible. It's mystifying the way he speaks. And there were memes about it back in the day, right? When he was first running, and even from before. Because he does talk, but who am I to speak? I'm a guy who kind of spirals out of control and gets caught up in sidebars and then loses his train, right? Who doesn't? But in terms of public speaking, that's why you write speeches and you fact check them and you try to hold yourself accountable first. That's supposed to be part of the civic duty of honoring all of that we pledge allegiance to. Something that people have just sort of thrown out the window, apparently. But let me read to you this quote, which someone else pulled but I know that this is not inaccurate because I also saw it live. I didn't do the hard work of transcribing it. Someone else did, and then I saw it on social media and I copied it, okay? And I don't think that in any way, shape, or form should expose me to being sued. But things are getting a little wacky out there. Everybody should simmer down a hot second. I don't be saying that 2 or 3 times a day for the rest of the end of the year and into next year. Everybody just simmer down. But also thoughtfully question everything, right? Let's question some of Donald Trump's words here. Quote, let's see whether or not somebody has the courage, whether it's legislators or a justice of the Supreme Court or a number of justices of the Supreme Court. That's the end of the sentence. Let's see if they have the courage to do what everybody in this country knows is right. Period. Everybody? He speaks loosely in the way that, like, they used to have this saying, loose lips sink ships. He speaks abstractly as if his whimsical opinions are hard, cold, well-established fact. I shouldn't be accused of doing that. I know my opinion is my own opinion. And I know that, like, if I really want to be factual about something, I've got to put in the effort to do my due diligence. I don't think Trump does his own due diligence. Let's look at what he says next. I received almost 75 million votes. The highest number of votes in the history of our country for a sitting president. I think that's technically correct, but I haven't fact-checked it, right? I think, though, that I have heard that reported out on a, quote, left-leaning media outlet. 12 million more than the 63 million we received 4 years ago. That I'm not really sure about. President Obama received 30 million less in his second term and won easily. That's true, but very misleading. I received 12 million more which is a record. And then he repeats 12 million more. Now, that's not Pants on Fire's, three noses Pinocchio wrong. According to the Associated Press, he got 74,223,030 votes, leading to 232 electoral college votes. What he doesn't acknowledge, right, is that Joe Biden got 81,282,903 votes. And darn it, I meant to have already done the math on a calculator for that. But let's do it live for shits and giggles. I wish this calculator had fun noises, so that as I typed 81,282,903, it would be fun, and you can be like, oh, look at that. That's I heard fun noises. But it's not, so. And the difference between that and, because I don't know, I don't do that kind of math in my head. Some people can. That's great. Good for you. I can't. Not going to bother start trying now. So, I don't know about this 12 million more than he got. Highest number in the history of our 12 million more than the 63 million we received 4 years ago. I don't know about that. I'm not sure how that works out. But apparently, 63 million, okay. So sure. But, so you did better than you did last time. That's great. What I'm saying, what I mean by I don't know how that works out, or what it means in his mind, is himself comparing that number and like the apparent improvement. He gained 12 million votes, and comparing that to President Obama's win is interesting, but kind of irrelevant, given that, according to the Associated Press, Biden gained 12 million plus 7,059,873 more votes than him compared to Obama, right? Because Joe Biden got 81,282,903 popular votes, leading to a 306 landslide victory of electoral college votes. And this lawsuit is I'm a bit of a cynic, so I can't help but wondering, this lawsuit, all of the 50 plus lawsuits, only one of which gained him whatever the win was, the rest of which were withdrawn and or dismissed and or removed and or flat out denied in a pretty harsh way, are noise to cover up what? That's my question as an observer, right? As an observer that understands I'm only as well informed as the limitations of the information available to me. That's my big question. What's he distracting us from? Is it the real Hail Mary pass, which is some sort of subversive coercion at the electoral college level, which curiously, it's something that I see Trump supporters accusing the left of trying to do? Maybe, perhaps, but that's dicey. Is it, and here's where I want to build an interesting bridge. The big elephant in the room, as I was talking about in the last episode, is that Trump's actions and his behaviors net result more people sick. And no matter how you slice it, that's on him. And we're left with questions like, well, Donald Trump claimed it's a hoax. His base and many other people are clinging to that. But if it's a hoax, then why is Trumptopia number one in the world in the rate of new infections per day, in the rate of deaths per day, and in the grand total of all infections and the grand total of deaths, right? Why are his own people, and I mean his own staffers and his own, supporters at the professional level, getting sick and dying? Because it's multiple Republican Party officials have now gotten sick and died from COVID-19. If it's a hoax, that shouldn't be happening, right? And if it's a hoax, why are so many COVID deniers posting it is not a hoax from their hospital beds? If it's a hoax, why has he stopped calling it a hoax? If it's a hoax, why is he so enthusiastic about Operation Warp Speed and getting credit for the literal invention of the vaccine? Is he applying some sort of denial word magic logic to the election that he applied to the situation with coronavirus? And if yes, why? With the coronavirus, one could ask that question, why? I don't want to be accused of accusing him of this, but, people are out there accusing him of this anyways. And, free speech. But one possible answer to why would you do what Donald Trump did, purely in the sphere of how to respond to coronavirus, to get the most possible number of people sick, it is a possible rational potential motivation for a person achieving or conducting themselves in the way that he factually did. So, simultaneously, one has to ask, a real critical thinker observing all these things going on, one has to ask, what are all the possible reasons why he is taking these actions? And, you know, the potentiality out there gets a little bit alarming, right? But the question remains, is it really constitutional? Is it a smokescreen? Is it a distraction from something else? Is he currently siphoning money from somewhere that we don't know about yet? It's not like it reportedly hasn't happened before, according to some claims floating around out there. But I digress. I've rambled on long enough, trying to keep these shows under an hour or so. And I want to build a bridge to... I want to leave on this button, right? Having asked all those questions, we're talking about the will of the people, and I haven't even really addressed that. Is one possible thing is to manipulate the will of the people and to try and build something with that base that he captivates in this narrative. And the other sort of dynamic I wanted originally meant to explore, which I'm going to go ahead and push the boundaries on how long it goes and just let myself ramble for about this for a hot second. Hopefully without trashing my voice. And I wrote this down earlier this morning, and it's funny, I've been trying to work my way to it. The closest thing, in quotes, to discussing politics in terms of conscious manifestation, also in quotes, collectively speaking, is the lip service talk and the real, actual, meaningful talk about the will of the people. The will of the people, if the results as reported by the Associated Press, arguably by all 50 states, including the swing states which have triple recounted, the will of the people by 7,059,873 popular electoral votes and popular votes and 306 electoral votes is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris give it their whack at running everything by being the people in the White House, right? And to bring things full circle to a spiritual place, that's the, like, one could characterize, and I don't mean to offend here, this is just me really trying to share my deep, sincere, analytical thoughts. One could characterize, it's been characterized as an attack and an onslaught on democracy itself. One could also, from a spiritual perspective, and I mean spiritual in the most broad, inclusive, generic sense of the word, because there's a bazillion flavors of spirituality out there. There are as many spiritualities as there are people. There are as many spiritual paths as there are human souls walking the earth. Take the word human souls away. That's a whole other episode. We are souls that have bodies, not the other way around, folks. But we'll have a big, deep discussion there. But could it be that there is some objective, some Trumpopian objective, that Trump and everyone around that movement are being led to try and manifest? And how do we respond to it? We've already voted. Well, technically I didn't vote, right? Because I'm not allowed to. I'm a toaster oven to the system. And if I pay enough ransom money, that's a very unfair characterization. If I pay my dues, take the class, and blah blah blah, and pass the test, I could vote. And I will someday, once I earn enough income, then I can afford all that, which quite frankly, it's always been on the edge of like, kind of not quite something in without it being a big hassle. But I digress. That's a whole nother episode worth of discussion too. Whether or not we voted, another way to look at the will of the people in terms of, because, something to hit on here, those two names were not the only names that got votes. Although they didn't render any electoral college results, quote, other candidates got 439,853. That's other candidates, right? And there's no breakout button there, and there should be Associated Press widget on Google, but there isn't. But that's 0.3%. Now, there's a lot of people who be like, that means nothing. But that's a lot of people who, and you can add that in, lump them in, right, to that have their will being expressed. And then there's the entire block of people who did not vote, which are a cornucopia mix of, conscientious dissenters, protest non-voters, and people who just aren't able to vote but have an opinion. And then everyone who's not legally entitled to vote. We also have opinions, and we also have will and willpower. But we'll have to come back to that. Spiritually, though, we are an interesting focal point, as I was saying at the beginning of the show. According to the mechanism and the Constitution and the electoral system, state by state, the Biden administration is going to get sworn in. But if we worry about the question, what if manifesting magic is literally real, we should probably put a little extra bump of effort, a little extra oomph of making sure we don't take the eye off the ball, metaphorically, meta-magically, meta-esoterically speaking, and make sure that if I may use a royal we of inclusion, if we are spiritual people and we want to make sure that vis-a-vis the mechanisms of mentally voting for what reality makes manifest, we should rally around mentally voting for making sure Donald Trump doesn't win this scandalous attempt to overturn the election using the argument that somehow it was stolen from him, which, unless we're being really, really hideously lied to by everyone, including Fox News, I don't think he's, has any real claim to. But we'll find out. We shall see. One way or the other. I'm of a really interesting split up opinion, right? I think that, like in the movies, it hangs in the balance on a knife's edge. And like the double slit experiment, the observer interferes with the unfolding of that which is observed. So, the literal expression of that is when, in the Obama example, the Obama coalition kind of kicked back and a lot of people took a pass on actually turning out to vote vis-a-vis whatever mechanisms were available to them. And although Obama still won, he did win. It just wasn't a stronger showing. But so was it on the other side, because the other side still lost. Despite believing quite fervently that God was on their side, it should be pointed out. Now, there's the entire side of questioning whether or not these two things that Trump has called a hoax are really a hoax. And we'll have to leave it for another day, friends, because I've got to rest my voice. I've got to live my practice of meditating and wrestling with my demons and trying to be the better person and trying to do all those lovely things, and write the literary universe that I'm trying to write, and also relax and recreate to the capacity that I have available to me now under these current renewed lockdown conditions. But once again, I've come to that moment in the show where I must humbly thank you, dear friends, for tuning in and for hearing me out. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts, and may you find yourself capable of wrestling with your own demons and confronting your own spiritual trauma and working on that spiritual healing we've been so abstractly calling out throughout the show for the last almost 4 years. I think it officially is 4 years, actually. Somewhere in my... Let me check to round out the show, if I can find the place where it says that. The show was created 4 years ago, according to my dashboard profile for the Almost Daily Zencast. It's been an honor and a pleasure, folks. And thank you for those of you who are real hardcore listeners, and welcome to those of you who are new. And I'll leave you with this bit of digital musical entertainment from your favorite animated digital DJ, DJ Z. Egress to your left, Ultra Trap 101 Remix Live. I have to interrupt the music, or at least jump in and address an omission, an error of omission. I meant to proceed after indicating other candidates, 439,853 votes cast for under candidates. There were two different candidates that got other numbers worthy of note. Howie Hawkins of the Green Party got 399,112 popular votes. Still in that 0.3% margin. But Joe Jorgensen of the Libertarian Party got 1,865,858 votes. So you add that up, and you've got, a number that still doesn't quite approach the grand total of the population of the United States of America, which is what, 300 and some odd million? What is the U.S. population total? I should have had this. $328.2 million as of the count in 2019, I believe. So there's some to the hashtag flood the vote there, folks. If I may be so suggestive as to say, Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, say no more. Whatever claims to history making record-breaking turnout, I would argue, folks, that add them all together and you could have still reached a much more impressive higher number, right? That would radically change everything if 150 million total turned out. If 200 million voters voted and turned out, right? Because I don't think we got that total. I haven't actually done the adding. Maybe I should do that now. No, this show's supposed to be over. We'll do that on another episode. Thanks for listening, folks. Until next time, peace out.